Nebraska's offseason is here, and with that, it's finally time to say goodbye to one of the best Husker senior classes we've seen in over a decade. So in today's video, I'm going to make my official predictions for Nebraska's NFL draft, talking about guys like Tommi Hill, Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, and so much more. Who gets drafted, which players don't get drafted, where do they get drafted, what rounds, and so much more. So really quick, lots of predictions to get into. Make sure to hit that like button. And also, if you're a diehard Nebraska fan and you're unsubscribed, it would help me a lot. Please hit that subscribe button. I'm going to post daily Husker football content all offseason long. So please, once again, hit that subscribe button. Join the best family here in Husker YouTube. But without further ado, let's get into it, going over my official predictions for Nebraska's 2025 NFL draft, which players get drafted, which ones don't, and so much more. So I want to get things started talking about arguably the best Husker player in the draft process. This is Ty Robinson, longtime Nebraska Blackshirt, had his big breakout year this year against 6'6", 310 pounds, had 7 sacks on the season, and overall broke out to be not only one of the best 3 techniques in all of the Big Ten, but probably one of the best defensive ends in all of college football. Now, Ty Robinson, I think, is going to be a high draft pick in the NFL draft just because his athleticism really translates to the NFL, honestly, better than it does at Nebraska or in college football. This guy is going to be a really good D tackle in the NFL. Probably not a DN, not an edge rusher, but a good D tackle. We forget he was a 4-star coming out of high school, has good traits, again, very tall, 6'6", long arms, good motor, honestly, pretty decent speed and athleticism. So we're talking about a guy that checks a lot of boxes from an NFL scout standpoint. He's very productive. He's a leader. He's good in the classroom. Honestly, his NFL stock has went up over the last couple months. So I believe that Ty Robinson will be drafted. I think that his draft stock is going to continue to rise up into April. And I think we're talking about a guy that will be drafted in the 3rd round when it's all said and done. You know, not probably a first-round draft pick like we'd want him to be, but Ty Robinson is going to be a very good player on Sundays. He's going to be a 3rd-round draft pick in the NFL. Probably not any higher just because there's a lot of good defensive linemen, probably some that are more physically impressive than Ty, but again, we're talking about a guy who's going to be very good on Sundays, so that's going to be enough to get him a 3rd-round selection. So that's my first prediction. Let's get into the second guy, Tommi Hill. So if we're going to go back to September of 2024, people were potentially discussing Tommi Hill as a first-round NFL draft pick, and then his injury got involved, and that sidelined him for basically the rest of this season. And after that, his draft stock kind of plummeted, not too much, but he's no longer being discussed as a first-round draft pick, not really a second-round draft pick anymore. You know, Tommi Hill, I still believe in him. I think he's going to be a great NFL player. You know, this entire corner class in the NFL draft, they're all injured, every single one of them, you know, from the top to the bottom. So that's nothing that's a knock on Tommi Hill, the fact that he got injured one time. We're talking about a guy who's 6 foot tall, about 300 or 210 pounds. Really physical corner, but also good speed, has experience playing wide receiver, so you know he has good ball skills, really good tackler at the line of scrimmage as well. So another guy who I believe is going to be very good in the NFL Combine. I think a lot of scouts are going to be impressed with him. Now, he's not going to be a second-round draft pick anymore just because they didn't get to see his entire film from his senior year because of that injury. I think he's more likely than not going to be an early 4th-round NFL draft pick. So going into day 3, he's going to be selected. But Tommi Hill, I think, is going to be really good on Sundays. Anybody that gets him is going to get a steal, and he's not going to get injured again. Of course, he had that foot injury that sidelined him for the majority of the season, but that's not going to happen again. He's going to be a really good player. I think if he played the majority of the season for Nebraska, we would be talking about him being a potential first-rounder. That's how good I think Tommi Hill is. So I'd expect a 4th-round selection for Tommi Hill. I could see 3rd round too. I expect him to have a good NFL draft process, but 4th round is what I'm expecting for Mr. Tommi Hill. Now I want to get to the offensive line with a player that I think a lot of people aren't talking about, but I believe that he will be drafted. This is Micah Mazzccua. So Micah Mazzccua, of course, had a tough year with Nebraska. Obviously didn't start as much as he should have started. Was rotated at guard, tackle, left tackle, and got benched from time to time. But we're talking about a guy who honestly could have entered the NFL draft last year. He had an invite to the Combine. If you get an invite to the Combine, it basically means you're almost a shoo-in to get drafted. So NFL scouts, they already have him on their radar. You know, he has some pretty good assets, being 6'5", once again, long arms, really experienced in the pass pro, about 330 pounds, all of that being good muscle, not really much bad weight on him. I imagine he's going to get another NFL combine invite. So I expect Micah Mazzccua to get drafted just because I think his game, once again, translates better to the NFL than it does to college football. He got dealt at bad hand this year. Again, some off-the-field stuff. He had some run-ins with Donovan Raiola. They didn't have the best relationship, but I do believe Micah Mazzccua will be drafted. I have a 6th-round grade on him. I think he does get drafted in that 6th-round mark. But I think Nebraska will have at least 3 players drafted. Let's get into the 4th. Bryce Benhart is a name that I'm absolutely going to be looking out for in this process. He has rose up the NFL draft boards the last couple of years. 6'9", once again, 315 pounds. Really good in the pass pro over the past couple seasons. He's constantly improving. He was not very good at the start of his Nebraska career, but I think he's going to also get an NFL combine invite. I have about a 6th or 7th round grade on him as well. I do think he gets drafted basically at the end. Again, we should remember that Matt Farniok got drafted for Nebraska a couple years ago, a longtime guard for the Huskers. He was not any good. If Matt Farniok can get drafted, Bryce Benhart, I believe, will. So I think he will get drafted in the 7th round. I want to get to Nash Hutmacher next because this is one where I don't really have a great read on where Nash is going to go in the draft, right? Obviously, had a really good year in 2023, had about, 4.5 sacks. That production went a little bit down this year, to say the least, only 24 tackles, 2 sacks. So he peaked last year, but again, still a very productive player, 6'4", 310 pounds. He didn't get dealt the best hand playing nose tackle, right? If you play nose tackle in college football, it's just really hard to put up stats, and that's really hard to impress NFL scouts. But and also it should be mentioned that there aren't really nose tackles in the NFL that much because a lot of teams, they don't run 3 defensive linemen, they run 4, right? They run basically a 3-4 or they run a 4-3. So there's not really zero technique nose tackles like Nash, so he's not going to play that in the NFL. But with that being said, I still think Nash gets drafted in the back half of this draft. I'd say a 6th round or 6th rounder for Nash. Just again, a very productive player. I don't know necessarily if his game translates to the NFL. He's not the best pass rusher in the world, but really good in the running game. So I think 6th or 7th round, barely getting drafted. Probably might be a UDFA as well, but I think he will be drafted. So that's up to 5 Huskers who I believe will get selected. Now let's get into some guys who I do not think will be selected for the Huskers. Let's get things started with Ben Scott. Now, if you asked me a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, I would have said absolutely Ben Scott was going to get drafted. He was up to about 5th round, 6th round in mock drafts going into this year. He really struggled this year. He's kind of an older guy too, 23 years old. I just don't think Ben Scott will get drafted. He really had a tough year in Pro Football Focus grading, gave up a couple sacks, was not good in the running game. I do think Ben Scott will be a UDFA, so he'll get drafted after, or he'll get picked up after the draft, but I don't really think he'll get drafted. I could see him maybe in the 7th round, but I don't expect Ben Scott to get drafted. Isaiah Neyor is one who's going to be in the NFL draft. I do not think he will be drafted. He's going to go to the NFL Combine, so that's interesting. The measurables are there, 6'4", runs a good 40 time, I'd imagine, probably in those 4.4s, the 4.4 range, but again, Isaiah Neyor just had so many problems. He's an older player. He's like 24 years old. So I just don't think an NFL team's really going to want to draft him. They're probably going to take a project there later in the draft. So I think Isaiah Neyor will once again be a UDFA. He has an opportunity with that NFL Draft Combine invite, but I don't think he will be drafted. Jamal Banks also, I don't believe, will be drafted. Again, love Jamal Banks, but just didn't have the year that we expected him to have. Really wasn't his fault. I think, honestly, Satterfield did not utilize him the right way. But Jamal Banks, he's 6'4". He's just not fast at all. He is not fast in NFL draft standards, right? He's probably going to run a 4.6, maybe a 4.7. So you can't run that in the NFL. You just can't. You have to have a little bit of pip in your step. That's really, really slow for a wide receiver. I just don't think Jamal Banks will be drafted. Probably another UDFA is going to get an invite, or not an invite, but he's going to get an opportunity to go to a practice squad or a training camp, but will not get drafted. 2 other guys, Isaac Gifford. This one should be obvious. Like Isaac Gifford, obviously a very productive player, but he's not going to get drafted. Kind of like a Phelan Sanford from last year. Good tackler. I could see him sticking around in the league, to be honest with you. Like, just because I say he's not going to get drafted doesn't mean he's not going to have a good career. I think Isaac Gifford will actually stick around in the NFL. He's just not incredibly physically impressive. He's 6'1". Okay, that's, as a safety, that's not great. Only about 200 pounds. That's not awesome. He's not the speediest guy in the world. He's not great in man coverage, right? He is a good tackler, at least somewhat, but he's not just going to impress an NFL scout. So I think he goes undrafted. Probably going to play safety at the next level. Maybe plays linebacker like his brother, but I do think he's going to stick around the NFL just because I think, a lot of times you just need a lunch pail guy on that practice squad, on that training camp who kind of just sticks around. I think that's going to be Isaac Gifford. A lot of Nebraska UDFAs like him have stuck around the NFL. Phelan Sanford's having a good career right now in the Broncos. So I think Isaac Gifford will go undrafted, but I do think he's going to have a good career. And one last guy, Thomas Fidone. As of recording this, he hasn't officially entered the NFL draft. I believe that's what he's going to do. Thomas Fidone is going undrafted. Probably is going to get an invite to a practice squad or a training camp, but he's going to go undrafted. Again, just not much production there, a lot of injuries, a lot of concerns. But that is my predictions going over Nebraska in the NFL draft. Let me know your thoughts down below. Which players do you think could get drafted? Do you disagree with me about somebody? Let me know in the comment section. Hey, if you made this far in the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. As always, folks, go be good, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.